Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to be looking at my favourite promise, or one of my favourite promises at least. The text is from Revelation 21, verse 4, speaking about a future time. I'll read it in the NIV. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. What a lovely verse. Do you know what? I only saw my dad really kind of tear up, really emotional, on two occasions. One occasion when my mum passed away, when my mum died, and the other occasion was when he was preaching and he quoted this verse. And as he quoted the verse, he became emotional, he became teary, suddenly choked. And the listeners in our little chapel were very shocked because Dad was so even temperamented and calm and collected normally. He was never really seen emotional. And well, I was only about 11 at the time, but we never talked about, and it never came up again. So I don't really know what prompted it. But I have an inkling, having reflected on both his life and this verse. More about that later. But the writer of Revelation, that's John, has received a series of visions from God about what is to come, a future age. And it's a glorious vision. Moffat describes it like this: from the smoke and pain and heat, it is a relief to pass into the clear, clean atmosphere of the eternal morning, where the breath of heaven is sweet and the vast city of God sparkles like a diamond in the radiance of his presence. What a wonderful description. But a vision of a new heaven and a new earth. And that idea of a new earth with a new atmosphere, a new sky, is a familiar theme throughout Scripture. Many of the old prophets in the Old Testament and in the New Testament spoke of this new heaven and earth. And this section of Revelation refers to that future time, what theologians sometimes call the end times. I like to call the new beginnings times. But I'm not going to get into the theological kind of debate about what exactly is going to happen then. Safe to say that God has plans for the future, and they are good. Everything evil gone, death destroyed. The new life is one long, unclouded wedding day for all of God's people. The happiest, most joyful time imaginable. And there's nothing to spoil it. No sorrow, no pain, no parting from loved ones, no night even. God is always there, always near. There's peace, freedom, security, and it's all wonderful. I got those last few words from my Lion's Handbook. What a promise, and one that encourages me that perhaps to lift my gaze from my ground level, as it were, in this world, limited view, to see things from God's perspective, because there is better to come. And getting that perspective is perhaps sometimes easier said than done, isn't it? Because even though we do see answers to prayer and some God's blessing in our lives right now, I think it's true to say if the future age is one of no tears, the age that we're living in now is certainly one of tears, isn't it? And Jesus said that in this world we would experience trouble. Our world is fallen, it's not perfect, and sometimes we have to pass, as the psalmist says, through that valley of tears to get to God's perfect place. Psalm 84, let's quote it. How lovely is your dwelling place, Lord Almighty. Then verse 5, blessed are those whose strength is in you, whose hearts are set on pilgrimage. As they pass through the valley of tears, they make it a place of springs. The autumn rains also cover it with pools. They go from strength to strength till each appears before God in Zion. Lovely words. I suppose it could be said that we are like pilgrims passing through the valley of tears sometimes, aren't we? And John tells his readers, many of which had suffered terribly for their faith, that they too can make it a place of springs, that there would be an end to their suffering one day. So John encourages them to fix their eyes on Jesus and on this promise, to encourage them that their suffering and their death is going to end one day. So why did my dad become so emotional over this verse? Well, was it that he'd endured great personal pain and suffering? And the thought of it coming to an end was what prompted that emotion? Well, I don't think so. I mean, for instance, he enjoyed quite good personal health up until his old age, of course, when all sorts of blips happen, don't they? But he made it to 92, still mowing the lawn. And on reflection, and having read his memoirs that he wrote when he was 87, he left it quite late, I think it's true to say that he certainly witnessed a lot of suffering, certainly in his early life. He was born in 1924, lived through the horrors of World War II, first as a first aider in Swansea that was heavily bombed. As a youngster, as a 16-year-old, he helped his father in the cleanup. And then when he was old enough, he entered the Navy at the age of 18. He was in the Arctic convoys. He was on minesweepers on D-Day. And among the things that he writes about in his memoirs was things like picking up wounded soldiers from the sea, from ships that had been exploded, picking up people with terrible wounds, survivors, overseeing the surrender of Japanese-occupied Malaysian islands later on in the war, 1945 to 46. He was made governor of an island where he had to oversee the surrender of Japanese soldiers, some of which had taken part in the most horrific of war crimes. On the island that he was in charge of, was most famous for a nurse, Vivian Bullwinkle, Australian nurse, who'd witnessed and survived the most horrific massacre on that island of wounded soldiers and their nurses by the hands of the Japanese. And he was witness to some of that information that came out in war crimes tribunals, that he attended some of those. And after the war, he became a missionary in Africa, getting involved in, of course, working amongst very poor people. I remember him describing a leper colony that he visited regularly to give blood. When I add all these things up that he had witnessed, I think he must have seen an awful lot of tears and death and mourning and pain. But of course, like most in his generation, he didn't talk about those things, perhaps not for years, kept it all tidied away under his British stiff upper lip. So to read of a time when God says, enough, no more tears, no more pain or mourning or death, I think probably hit him with unexpected impact when he recalled all those times when he had witnessed those things. So when I read that verse, I think how much it must have meant to my dad. I think now how much it means to me. And I thank God that he has got good things planned for us in the future. So thank you for listening. God bless. Bye for now.